So Wes, do you have a list of everyone that's on the call?
I do.
Aha, that's awesome. Okay.
Okay, well, we're going to have to get started, so I'd like to say good morning to everyone. This is Wes Burke with Emerald Scientific. We really appreciate you participating in this call, and we appreciate you participating in the program. It's your participation, of course, that makes the entire program possible, and we believe that not only is this program extraordinarily beneficial for your labs, but it's tremendously beneficial for the industry as a whole, and that's why we're so excited to be presenting this data today. We are using a GoToMeeting as a platform. It's a little different than a webinar. It does give you the ability to utilize audio, but I'm going to ask that you not do that today for the sake of time and to keep the audio clear for all the participants. If you would please keep your audio muted and type questions in the chat. We will handle those in the order that we receive them at the end of the presentation. And if you would be so kind as to make sure when you send your questions in, you just select administrator, and that way we'll be able to navigate the questions a little more proficiently at the end. The program is being recorded today, and we'll make it available to everyone for later viewing if you miss parts or want to go back and review. And with that, I'd like to introduce Ken Snoke. He's the president of Emerald Scientific. Ken, take it away.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thanks, Wes. I just thought I'd take a quick minute and give a little bit of a background to the test. As you, I'm sure, are aware, it's a little bit maybe even convoluted with the different groups of people that are involved in this. So maybe I can give you just a quick 1-minute background. You know, Emerald Scientific is, our core business is obviously is a scientific distributor. But a couple of years ago, we were approached by somebody in the industry and said, you know, we really need to promote proficiency testing amongst the labs, and since you're already working with them, you guys are in a great position to help us promote that. And so we became involved mostly just on trying to get folks to participate in PTs, and soon after that, you know, as a new industry, it became immediately evident how useful an interlab comparison would be. And I think we'll see from some of the data today, some of the questions that this type of thing can create for an industry, and they're important questions that need to be answered. And so we started promoting the Emerald test back in 2014, and this is the first one that now is being directed by an advisory panel. It became evident pretty quickly last year that you know, we are not qualified or appropriate, nor should we be in a position to be making decisions about the direction of this program. And so we put together an advisory panel of some folks with a lot of experience in proficiency testing and interlab comparisons, as well as some representatives from the industry, and they've been now directing the test itself and analyzing the data. So part of that is choosing which tests to offer. That's always a balance between what's available out there, both altogether and from accredited PT providers. It's also a balance of what's most important for the industry right now, and as a newer industry, potentially you know, what we can handle all at once. So we made the choice, or the panel decided this time, to do a 5-part potency PT, 6-part if you include the total THC measurement, and then a residual solvent proficiency test as well. And the decision was made to use the American Oil Chemists Society, AOCS, to handle the data. And so there was we've got a PT manufacturer, which is absolute standards, and then the data is submitted and then moved over to AOCS for analysis. And we're going to be making a lot of improvements on this program as it goes along. And let's see, I think with that, Cindy, I'll just go ahead and pass it along to you, and we can start digging into the data on this one. And we certainly, again, I want to agree with Wes and echo his sentiment there. We should certainly appreciate everybody's involvement. We had a stronger response than we even anticipated so much so that we had to make 2 manufacturing lots of the PT for the Potency to meet the demand, and we're going to address that next time by registering everybody first, and then have about a week break after we get everybody registered for the test, and then we will manufacture the test specifically for everybody that's enrolled. So we make sure that we don't have any groups that are where we have to do 2 manufacturing runs, because we'd rather have the interlab comparison component come from a single manufacturing run. So I think with that, Cynthia, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, so I'm going to ask a question. Are you seeing a screen of x-rays of my neck or of a report? Because I have 2 screens and I don't know which one's showing.
X-ray.
It's the x-rays.
Okay, well, let's get rid of my x-rays, and I will bring this report down here. Okay, well, I thought I would. Okay, I'm going to quickly go through this, and if someone has a question, please, again, put it on the chat screen, and we will address that. I want to make sure we have plenty of time for questions, and so if you don't understand, or if I went too quickly, please do write in a question and we'll address that in a little bit. So here's the AOCS lab proficiency reports from our standard program that we run 44 different series. And I want to point out right now that it does say 2015 here, because our normal systems run 2015 through 2016, and this last quarter was the 4th quarter of our 2015 year. We are going to have that reprogrammed, so that report will be different in the future, and we're also going to be able to add the Emerald logo. So the first thing you have on the page is everybody's analyst number on the left, and then their values for the 6 components that were tested. These are just the raw values as they were entered into the system. And that continues on the second page. The summary of the Z-scores is more informative. You now have those same analyst numbers, but the number that you're seeing under the constituents is a calculation of how far their data was from the consensus mean. If it's in black, it means it was less than 2 standard deviations from the consensus mean. If it is in yellow, that means that they were between 2 and 3 standard deviations from the consensus mean. And if it's in red, it is more than 3 standard deviations from the consensus mean. I'm going to back up quickly and identify outliers for you. Anything that has a G next to it is identified as a Grubbs outlier. And in the calculation of the consensus mean, those Grubbs outliers are not included in the calculation for the consensus mean, because they obviously don't belong with the rest. And you can see we did not have that many outliers. There were only a few. So that's a pretty tight data set, and it's very impressive that things are going so well. And even on these sets, I see many very mature LPP programs that have just as many yellows and reds. At the bottom of the summary score, you have, I'll blow this up a little bit, there are all the statistics that are calculated by our program. They include the assessment, assigned value, and here the assigned value actually means consensus mean. So that is the consensus mean as calculated per ISO 13528 statistical guidelines. And we can read that document together if you'd like to someday. I'm not going to go into it here. They have a relative standard deviation, limit of reproducibility, lower limit of tolerance, upper limit of tolerance, the standard error, the number of analytes that submitted results, number of outliers, and the number of participants. That's a lot of good, useful information, and I think that was used to look at some other data as well. After the summary, we actually do a graphic of these Z-scores, which I think is a very useful tool. You can easily see by which way the arrows point If your lab has a little bit of a bias going one way or the other, or you know, bouncing back and forth between the consensus mean, which statistically would be random error, and that would be great. And obviously we don't know who any of these analyst numbers are, but so for example, 3299, you know, they're kind of low on everything, so they might want to go back and use this as a learning tool and recalibrate and look at some more standards. The ones that are just going back and forth, you know, maybe that's just random error about the consensus mean. So you can tell a lot from these graphical pictures. And it continues over here. And again, you know, even somebody like 5725, yeah, they're just a little bit high on everything. So obviously they're within the consensus mean, within standard 2 deviations, but they might want to look at that because random error would tell you that you should be above and below that mean. Next on the reports, you were given the kernel density plots for each analyte. I think these are another good graphical representation, especially when you're looking at method. We can identify what method goes with which value, and you can very easily see that somebody had something low and something high, but everybody else was pretty much normalized around the mean. How wide the density plot is will determine how tight that method is, how many people can accurately and precisely get near the consensus mean. We have some that are really tight, like the CBN. This is a very, very tight density plot. Very impressive that everybody did so well on that number. THCA, not quite so tight. We might have some bimodal stuff going on here. Not enough data in this set to talk about that. Everything else looks pretty normalized and randomized. So if we don't have any questions on the reports you received, I'm going to call up a presentation that has a little bit more information where we looked at the data per method and also the difference between the assigned values that came from the vendor and the consensus mean. Okay, not seeing any questions on the screen. I will go ahead and switch over. Oops, that's not going to want to do that. Okay. Oh, well, I'm just not going to run it in that mode. Here's the auxiliary data for potency. I'm going to show you the kernel density plot. We've already seen these. And here are the CBN results separated out by method. So there were a couple of labs that ran GCFID. There were 3 labs that ran LC mass spec. One of the labs ran a supercritical fluid UV, LC. And then most people, we can see, ran some type of LC UV method. We don't have any more details than that of the methods. In upcoming programs, we may get a little bit more definition about the methods so we can do more of this categorization, but it looks like most people are running LCUV. As you can see on the graph, they're all made the same. The assigned value is in the blue, and I've put the value on there, and it's also written in the right-hand column, and the consensus value is always in green. I'm going to go from the CBN results over to the CBD results. And again, the LC UV methods are all pretty normally distributed around the consensus mean. And it looks like the GC mass spec stuff is a little bit higher on this one. So that may be an inherent thing in the method. We just don't have enough data to tell. But again, it's not crazy data. It's pretty tight. The CBDA results look very tight around the consensus mean. we have, one low result there, but the bulk of this is very nicely distributed around the consensus mean. THC results, they're kind of scattered a little bit, which can be seen a little bit in the density plot because it's there's high and there's lows, and it's a little bit scattered. The assigned value and the consensus mean are actually the same number on this chart. It's the only one of the analytes where those two numbers agreed. THCA, as you heard earlier, is a little bit scattered. We weren't sure what's going on with this, and Sean and Roger and I all looked at the data 14 ways from Sunday, and we couldn't really put a finger on it. It's just something I think we need to look into in the future, and really watch our standards and be careful with our methods when we're doing THCA, because it seems to be one of those analytes that gives people problems and doesn't want to just fall in line and have a nice tight set of answers. So the standard deviations are pretty wide. These bars are 2 standard deviations for the THCA, and that's just something we're going to have to look at in the future. Now, total THC, surprisingly enough, looks pretty well distributed along this, but when we looked very closely at the data, there were some folks who weren't actually calculating it properly. So we just want to do a reminder to everybody. So I didn't put the analyst numbers up here of what we found, but most people you can see calculated it THC plus 0.7877 times THCA, which, is how the protons and neutrons determine that number. And then you just add those two things together and you get your total. It is not proper to just add the two because the carboxylic acid does add extra weight and needs to be accounted for in the calculation. And then there were a couple folks who weren't quite sure how they did the calculation. But for future tests, everyone can know that you have to take your THC plus THCA times 0.887. And we could put parentheses around there, but algebra rules means you do that first. So that is all the, oops, wrong data. That is all the potency data that we went through. And if we have some questions, Wes, can you?
Yeah, I did forward 2 questions to you in the chat. Are you able to view those? If not, I'll read them to you.
Okay, I can see them. So the samples were not received on ice. For our particular values, our total THC value is comparable to everyone else. However, our THCA value is much lower, and our THC values are much higher, as in our CBN values. This all could be explained by degradation due to heat experienced during shipping. This could also be explained by the different preparations that were sent out to various labs. We have retested our sample 4 times on different instruments, different technologies, and by 4 different technicians, and we still get the same results. In view of the different batches of sample and the uncertain temperatures experienced during shipping, how can I trust the consensus mean?
And before you tackle that, I'll just mention too that Brad sent in a question that about the stability of THCA in solution as well. So this is a theme in the questions.
I completely agree with Chris's concern that we do need to instill shipping procedures for the samples that make sure that the samples retain their integrity while shipped. Most assuredly, shipping them on ice in a styrofoam cooler overnight is the way it should be done. So we will be discussing that change and requiring that in future PT programs. I don't know how to address Chris's consensus mean concern, but I completely understand what he's talking about. If the three people who, because there are three of the, on the THC, there's obviously three people, and if you go back and look at these three people, they all had higher THC, and they all nailed the total right on the money. So it appears that those three folks received samples that were degraded from THCA to THC, because that's the only thing that makes sense when they got the total right. Sean, Ken, you guys want to jump in here?
Yeah, sure. This is Ken. Yeah, we noticed the same thing early on, and so we'll just make sure in future tests to require the PT manufacturer to follow specific shipping, guidelines. The other thing we're going to do, as I mentioned, I think, is we'll have an enrollment period, and then basically everybody will receive their PTs on the same day next time. So we'll have an enrollment period, then a manufacturing period, and then there's going to be a set day where everything is shipped out. It'll be one manufacturing run. Everything will be shipped the same way. And so then at least from the PT manufacturer to the participant will be standardized very well at that point. And then it's up to the participant within the window of time, whether it's a week or 2 weeks, to take the test to handle things accordingly. So I totally understand this. I know Sean ran, I believe, some analysis on the data that looked at when people ordered and received their test to see if we could see any bias or any trends based on, as time went, did things degrade further, and we could see that. But if I'm remembering correctly, Sean, I don't know if you want to chime in if you're there, but I don't believe there was any trend at all that we could tell from that data.
Yeah, I remember talking about that with Sean, and I don't think he's on the call right here, but there weren't enough data points to really see a trend on the shipping dates versus analysis dates. So unfortunately, we just didn't have enough data to apply any statistical analysis.
Yeah, so
okay, I have
a big spot for improvement next time around for sure.
Yeah, and I think that shipping overnight on ice in styrofoam all on the same day will eliminate that from being the issue. Okay, we have another question. Okay. So the question is, it seems like some labs were closer to the assigned value and the consensus value was further off from the assigned value. How are those scores treated? For example, if the assigned THCA was 40 and the number of 46 is closer to the true value than the consensus mean of 30 is. Yet this number seems further out. How is this explained? So let's pull up a couple of examples. So here's the THC results. The consensus mean is 79.93, and the assigned value from the vendor was 80.2. So in this circumstance, it agreed perfectly. In another circumstance, and I'll pick one that's pretty far off. So for example, CBD. The assigned value from the vendor was 60.5. The consensus mean was 55.7. It's about 10% off by my math. We see that the assigned values are higher than the consensus mean on all but one analyte. I don't know how to explain that. I can say that I doubt that 36 labs are wrong. I don't know how I don't know how the vendor did his testing. I don't know what standards he used to calibrate his instrument, and I don't know any of that detail. So how we run all of our other LPP series at AOCS, and we've been doing it for about 100 years, is that we trust that these labs have good calibrated standard methods, and we send unknown samples, and we judge them on the consensus mean and calculate the z-scores on that. I don't know how to explain it. I don't know why they seem to be consistently higher. In this case, you've got a 17 versus 22, so that's a little more than 10%. Here's 31, add 9 to 40. Yeah, in this case, almost everyone's below the assigned value except for the two mass specs that are traditionally running high anyway. I'm not sure anybody else want to jump in and try and address that.
I looked at, you know, there's a couple places where I think this might come into play. I mean, obviously, you know, when considering any type of accreditation or anything, I think that's the accreditor's responsibility, and you can discuss that with them. I think it's a valid argument, you know, if you score closer to the, you know, the assigned value, the gravimetric value that you can talk about. We looked at, you know, we do this thing where we give badges to folks to use, and the criteria for that is within 2 standard deviations on all analytes but one. So if you had one that you were way off on or a little bit outside of, that's fine, but at least in this case for the potency, 5 of the 6 measurements needed to fall within 2 standard deviations. And if you shift that and go off of the assigned value, it didn't change the assignment of a badge for anybody. So at least we looked at that. Otherwise, you know, I think it's a good point, and we'll, again, when we have a lot more historical data over time, I mean, Cynthia or anybody else, since the consensus means were almost all low, again, does that point a little bit towards, you know, just degradation? I mean, if we saw it all over the place, it'd be one thing, but the fact that they're all lower, you know, does that point to sample degradation?
I think that it points to an issue that needs to be addressed in future PTs. So maybe we need to have more verification of the assigned value by you know, some additional methods, or have, you know, I don't know what the example is or the exact answer is, but I think that we do need to do a little bit more investigating and see how we could be more sure of that value in the future. Because, you know, I know that everybody's trying to do a really great job in their lab, and they're calibrating, and they're doing quality work, and they're doing it day in and day out, and I just don't feel like 36 labs are wrong. That would be highly unusual.
Cynthia, I've sent a couple more questions to you.
Okay. In future offerings, is there a way for labs to report their uncertainty of measurement? It would be interesting to evaluate how individual labs' uncertainty of measurement aligns with the differences between assigned value on consensus mean. Sherry, I think that is a wonderful idea, and at AOCS we can certainly add that to the tickets, and we can make that an option that can be reported on. I'm making a note of it right now. As far as data entry goes, we have been discussing logging into the AOCS portal, LPP portal, and entering your data there. And with that process comes the ability for me to put things like this on the ticket. So when you log in to enter your results, it will automatically have a list of the different methods that you can choose from that most people are running, or an other, and then we could put something like a measurement of uncertainty next to that so all that information could be recorded. Do we have any info about which labs use the standard purchased from the PT vendor, or who used their current standards purchased from every vendor? No, we did not gather that information to my knowledge, but it will be something that we've already put on the list that should be recorded on future PTs, because, and I just know this anecdotally from people saying it, I haven't done the experiments myself, but I have heard from many labs that depending on who you buy your standards from, not all 200 mg per mil vials are created equal when you order them. So that is a concern in the industry. I think that people were aware of it, and hopefully it's getting better and things are tightening up. And others may be able to speak to that more so than I can, but we would like another option, like whose standards did you use? And I'm going to make the assumption that because you're doing a PT, that the labs had done a fresh calibration, probably using new standards, and did everything they could to ensure that they were getting the right answer. Have I missed any of the questions?
No, Cynthia, you've done a great job getting them all, I believe. Does anyone have any questions before we wrap this up? Any last questions? Type them in the chat. While we're waiting to see that, I just want to again say thanks so much to everyone that participated. I also want to give special recognition to the advisory panel, Sean Kastner, Dr. Roger Volker, Cynthia Ludwig, Dr. Robert Martin, and Tammy Musich. We really appreciate all of your participation. I think that this whole program has evolved so significantly because of the participation there. I think it's worth a special thanks to AOCS. The data analytics on this are so far more sophisticated than what we've been able to return in the past, and we're extraordinarily grateful for that partnership. And of course, too, for Absolute Standards and Stephen Arpey and Melissa Stonier. I do see one last question, and that is, when will we see the RSA results? So I guess I can field that immediately.
I guess I don't know what RSA means.
Residual solvent, maybe?
Yeah, that was
okay.
my guess. And there is a separate, there was clarification. It is residual solvent analysis. There's a separate webinar that starts at 11 for that, 11 Pacific time. So in about 20 minutes from now, the link to that webinar has been sent out via email. And in fact, it went out this morning to all the participants. Note in the subject line, there's clarification in those GoToMeeting invites, separating the potency from the residual solvent, and be sure that you click the correct link at 11 a.m. to enter the residual solvent presentation. It's been asked if this presentation was recorded, and yes, indeed, it has been recorded, and we will have that made available to not only everyone on the presentation today, but for the handful of folks that participated in the PT and weren't able to make the webinar today.
Wes, I'd just like to throw in too, I know this makes the statisticians in the group cringe, but I'm not a statistician and I'm not an accreditor, so I get to say things like this. I mean, the results were, I think, phenomenally positive. This industry has taken a fair amount of heat about variance and data, throughout labs in the industry, and to have 40 labs participate in a proficiency testing program that has evolved without the participation from any federal oversight or agency to help us define and validate methods. To see these kinds of results, I think is really, really encouraging. I think it's a lot of ammunition for the testing industry to demonstrate and show how we are improving as an industry. And I hope everybody feels really pleased with how we did as an industry, because it was super impressive. So
Ken, I wanna just piggyback on that and say I completely agree. At AOCS, we run 44 different series, and those are highly regulated, highly mature, validated methods from our official methods book, most of them, and that data looks no better than this data in general. So it's just a testament to how well everyone's doing without, like you said, official methods that will be coming, or any kind of oversight instruction. So I think that it shows that the industry is really working hard to do a good job to get the right answers. And I can say, of those labs who did seem to have a struggle, we've talked to them, we've talked about what they might do to shore up those numbers a little bit, and they were very eager to use this as a learning tool, because it's not really meant to be a disciplinary tool at all. It's really for us to learn and for the labs to learn from each other and from the data of where we might be able to do a little bit better job. But I think overall, absolutely, I think this is really strong data and shows that the industry is really doing a great job.
yeah, and some important trends. We'll definitely keep improving the test with our, like we said, our enrollment and shipping methods, recording more data, which standards folks are using, the specific method data, some things like that. The reporting of the data itself directly, hopefully next time to AOCS, so we're not moving numbers. I think all of these things will continue to improve the program, and we'll be adding some other categories of tests soon for pesticides and possibly some other things. So you'll be hearing from us very soon about what to be looking for in the fall. Also, I just want to throw in real quick to Wes before we end it, and then I'll be finished. If anybody has an interest to participate in the advisory panel, please feel free to contact me or Wes. I'm Ken at emeraldscientific.com, and Wes is Wes at emeraldscientific.com. So with that, I'm done. Wes?
Ken, you want to talk a little bit about the next test and the timeframes and signups? Are we ready to do that?
Yeah, basically, it'll be right around September 20th. Is the time that it will be occurring. So it looks like the way we're going to do this is have probably a 1-month enrollment program right around that time. So probably a 3 or 4 week enrollment, and then, like I mentioned, we'll close enrollment. We will take 1 or 2 weeks for the various manufacturers to make, if we have somebody making one for solvents and another for, potency or pesticides. And then after the manufacturing run is done, like I said, we'll ship everything out on a single day, and then there will be a 1 or 2 week period to actually take the test. So that's how that one will roll out. We'll start advertising and promoting it probably in July or August, and then the test itself will be towards the end of September.
Okay, everyone. Thanks so much for participating. We appreciate it, and we look forward to the next round of this. We appreciate your patience and understanding as we work out the kinks and make this the absolute best program that we can for everyone. We will terminate this now. We'll send links to everyone for the recordings, and we'll begin the residual solvent presentation in about 15 minutes. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.